This is an interesting one, and I picked this story because I have a feeling that you are going to get a kick out of it, and there's a couple different directions we could take it. And it's from El Pasoan 89. It's called The Shaking Car. And if the cars are rocking...
Don't bother knocking.
Yep, I got to it before you did. I felt it boiling up inside you. I was like, no, I have to get it out of the way first. Anyway, he says, my wife and I, at the time girlfriend, had one of the scariest moments of our lives that, to this day, haunts me. We were in my car ready to leave, and we heard a strong clicking noise. It was coming from her side, and I thought her knee was holding the lock button. It was a rapid clicking and didn't stop. The longer it went on, the more I realized it was the door handle being pulled. Then the car started to shake as if someone was pulling the door handle up as hard as they could. We both looked at each other and told each other to cut it out. Finally, it stops. I get outside and look around, and under the car, nothing. We, of course, looked around as it was happening and saw nothing as well. What scares me the most is that we were in a well-lit area right under the street lamp. We could see clearly all around us. My wife hates when I bring this story up, and when she saw me writing this, she got mad. She's like, you better not be talking about that shaky car.
So, it's like a lot of indigenous stories. You can't name what is affecting you.
Yeah, because it just attracts it, right? It's this whole
it's such a well-known thing that it's even part of Harry Potter. He who must not be named.
Yeah. Never saw Harry Potter, but I believe it.
I'm sure you've heard that saying before.
Oh, yeah, of course. Surprisingly, everyone named him nonstop to me. But that's fine. That's not for
That's why he came back.
Classic. I will say this. When that big earthquake hit in Alaska, 2018, right? Or was it 2017? I can't remember anymore.
Yeah.
Big one.
A few years ago.
Yeah, it's been a few years now. I had just pulled up to work, and I was sitting in my car before going into work, and it felt like the biggest wind gush of all time was just rocking the car. And I was like, dang. And I looked around, I was like, it doesn't even look like the trees are moving that fast. That's kind of crazy. And when I went inside, everything was like on the floor. And so I was sitting there, I was like, oh, it was an earthquake. But to me, inside my car at the time, it literally just felt like a really strong wind was rocking the car for like 30 seconds, to the point where I was sitting there like, damn, this is just the biggest wind burst of all time, man. When's this going to end? So I can only imagine people that were actually inside like a building and seeing everything fly off the walls.
Yeah.
I was just in my car like, okay.
That must have been scary. I was up in Prudhoe Bay at the time, flying home that morning.
Mm-hmm.
And those aftershocks were worse than any of the ones I was in California, any of the earthquakes. But including the Northridge one. It felt worse than that.
Yeah. And so I say that because that kind of is the same thing this person was explaining about their story. Like, didn't see anything around, but car was just violently shaking like someone was trying to lift the handle constantly. The only thing that doesn't explain is, well, number one, we don't know the location if they're even in earthquake country.
The wife wouldn't be so angry about him bringing it up if it was just an earthquake.
Yeah, and also, like, that's something you can look up very easily. Like, was there an earthquake or some kind of tremor or something like that? Like, are you on a fault line? Like, these are things that people that live in those areas are very familiar with. And so they're like, let's knock this out first. Check, was it an earthquake? No? What the hell was it? Because the whole clicking thing of that door handle, like someone was just constantly trying to, that's kind of spooky, man. I don't know.
Reminds me of that old urban legend with the hook.
The hook,
on Lover's Lane, but they're somewhere where it's well lit.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be anything there.
You would think, yeah.
There's always something there. We just can't see everything around us because we don't see in that spectrum.
But what's it trying to, why is it trying to come in? Is it trying to come in? Because I like to think that like a spirit or something would be aware that the door is locked.
What if it was like a spirit that was running from something much worse?
Like, let me in, the dog man. He's coming.
Dog man.
It's the dog man.
It's got to be something scary.
The tax collector. He's coming.
Yeah.
Scarier than a dog man. Cthulhu.
Which isn't real, but.
Yeah. Sure. I'm glad you differentiated between the real things and the not real things.
Right.
Yeah.
You got to do it. Science.
For science, we'll get into one more. And this is another one that didn't really make it into an episode. So I was like, let's throw it out there for our YouTube. It's from Kopaka 13. And it's called It Just Stared at Me.
That's a fun name.
Kopaka. It Just Stared at Me. And this is the story, if you remember from the Mothman that I was telling about earlier. The Halloween, the Mothman story. I said, I have another Mothman. This is the other Mothman story. At some point, we're going to do an episode on Mothman, and it's going to be really amazing and fun and entertaining, as we do. Subscribe if you haven't. But in the meantime, I was like, these stories aren't really super Mothman in nature. So I'm going to I'll keep them out of the Mothman episode because these don't feel like Mothman to me, but they were definitely labeled as Mothman by the people that saw it. But who am I to judge, I'm just a guy in a garage talking to my father-in-law about ghosts and stuff.
With a bunch of moths looking on, theoretically, and they could be mad.
Okay. Sure, that's an option as well. I'll let you have that.
My voice did something weird right there.
Yeah, just right there. Anyway, it goes, I shared a room with my sister around the age of 7, but she was off at a sleepover party the night it happened. As a little kid, I was terrified of lots of things. I'd never seen anything close to a horror film, not even The Nightmare Before Christmas, because of how jumpy I was. Sounds like my childhood. Anyway, so naturally the dark freaked me out. Hey, did I write this? No, I was really nightmare prone, which caused everyone to say this was a dream later, but this was different. It was more vivid, too realistic to be a dream. I was hiding under my sheets like the cowardly kid I was.
I've been there.
Sam, when I decided to poke my head out to get some cool air. Ah, yes. And I saw...
Tooted.
Yeah, oh, God, Mothman. No. And I saw something in my room, something clearly not human. I called it an alien at the time because that's the closest thing my horror-ignorant mind could liken it to. Now I see it as more similar to the Rake or the Mothman. Again, two very different shaped creatures, my friend. Its head was big and egg-shaped, like those stereotypical gray aliens. Far too big for its tiny, slender body. It was totally naked, pale gray or ashen white skin. The lack of light made it hard to tell. All the bones were visible. It's... Gonna have to bleep this out. Its tiny shriveled sack and just hung there between its legs. Its hands were way too big for the toothpick-like arms. It was standing at a really unnatural angle. Its eyes were totally black and shiny, seemed to be the only feature on its weird head, and were sunken in little red holes. Most unsettling of all, it was just staring at me. After a few seconds of being completely paralyzed in fear, I pulled the covers back up over my head. What else could I do? I stayed there for the rest of the night until I fell asleep. I know this thing wasn't human. I told my parents the next day and they said I was dreaming. I made up a lot of stories back then. I remember a lot of them vividly, and the rest of my childhood is really, really hazy. But seeing that thing in my room is one of the childhood memories that stuck with me the most. I have no idea what it was, and despite my fascination with horror stories, I don't think I want to know.
What's a rake look like?
You remember when we did the Crawlers episode? It was like season 1 or something like that of the podcast. Similar to that. Just kind of pale, thin, white, black-eyed. At least that's how most of them are described as. Have you seen, there's a pretty popular picture, I'm sure it's photoshopped, of a weird, like pale white entity in the woods looking up at a game cam?
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty much what a rake looks like. Allegedly.
I don't understand where this person got Mothman from.
Either do I. The black eyes.
Maybe from the movie. Wasn't there something in the movie that was maybe had more black eyes? Or
you thinking like Mothman Prophecies with Richard Gere? I don't think so.
I don't know. It's been a while since I've seen it.
Yeah, I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Like everything, like both of the stories that I had, I was like, none of these sound like the actual Mothman.
If there is a Mothman.
Which there is. Yeah, so I was like, I'll just throw them in we'll throw them in a video, see what people think. So that's what we're here for you to tell us what you think these things are, because we certainly do not have the answers. And that is a pretty much running theme of this show, is we don't have the answers. We come to our listeners. We share these stories with you in hopes that some of you out there are maybe a little more learned, educated than we are, and give us your thoughts on it. What do you think? You've heard the stories now. You tell us, what do you think these things were? Was it really the Mothman? Is there a description of the Mothman that is vastly different than what we're familiar with that maybe lines up with this? Does the Mothman have a tiny shriveled sack?
That actually ruled out little grays because we
know that they don't have tiny shriveled sacks. We've looked very, very intensely into the anatomy of gray aliens, and I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt, it's not there.
We've looked as closely at their anatomy as the Mexican government recently did.
Topical. Nice. Nice. Very nice. So anyway, yeah, we'll see you guys later. How do I end this? This isn't a show or anything. These are just bonus stories.
We'll see you the next time.
No, how about we don't end it? We just close it out on like a phrase. Because aren't you supposed to close YouTube videos out just like abruptly?
Sometimes.
I think that's the way it's supposed to be. And that just cuts right here.